The United Nations has released its much anticipated report on whether sarin gas was used in Damascus on August 21st. And of course, they have corroborated what the US, UK, and French intelligence agencies have been telling us for the last month, that yes, indeed, sarin gas was unleashed on the innocent civilian populations of these places. And while they didn't assign any direct blame, this report was never designed to do that. They were just there to provide the facts, but they did provide enough data for others to easily assess this and say, of course, this backs up what we've been saying all along, that it was Assad, and also to even provide a trajectory of the path that these rockets traveled on, and you can clearly see where they were fired from.
Yeah, the New York Times and the Human Rights Watch took the data and pinpointed where the canisters would have been launched from if they were launched, when they were launched, because they were in fact launched. And it came from an Assad complex overlooking parts of the city that were controlled by the Free Syrian Army. It also released some information about the canisters that were used, and that one of the canisters was a 56-liter canister of sarin gas, which in order to fire that off, you would have to launch it from a rather large artillery piece, the size of a tank.
Huge.
Which for the Free Syrian Army to concoct 56 liters of sarin gas would require tremendous capabilities, biotechnological capabilities, which they simply don't have. But for them to launch a 56-liter canister of sarin, they would have had to take a tank-size artillery piece and in the course of a day, maneuver it into the Assad complex,
Fight their way in.
Undetected, because the Assad regime would have said, like, oh, these guys are bringing in sarin gas to fire onto their own people. So they would have had to do it undetected, or else the Assad regime would have clearly pointed that out to the rest of the world, that the Free Syrian Army is bringing in sarin gas. So they would have had to bring in an artillery piece into the Assad complex, fire it onto their own people
Multiple times.
then remove the artillery piece, all undetected by the Assad regime, and all undetected by the Free Syrian Army, which makes no sense. And if you've been following this, you have Vladimir Putin standing in the way, saying now recently that he's going to come out and he's going to release information saying that he has evidence that the Free Syrian Army was responsible for this.
No, I don't know if he's so vague, of course, as always, but that the Free Syrian Army has used chemical weapons. That's the claim, that he's going to prove it to the UN Security Council. He's going to take his case there. Again, a lot of talk from Putin, no real action or concrete evidence on his part.
So what this UN report simply does is justifies and backs up the President of the United States, Barack Obama, who has been carrying a steady line saying if you use the weapons, there's going to be consequences, and the consequences are now that Syria has to remove their weapons. And what this UN report really needs to kind of hammer home to the American people is that strikes are still on the table here, right? If Syria
and that Obama was right.
Obama
was right,
absolutely,
and yes,
absolutely.
But this issue hasn't been solved.
Let me finish my point in that the issue hasn't been solved, and that he has said that if you stand in the way of eradicating these chemical weapons, that I will strike you. And so that's what the American people have to remember, is that the Assad regime ordered the use of sarin on their people, and they must be held responsible for it. And if they stand in the way of removing these chemical weapons,
of identifying the chemical weapons, and just to speak, they need to be struck, is basically what you're saying, right?
A confined military strike that sends the message that chemical weapons like this are not going to be used, and if you do use them, there are going to be consequences to pay.